I wonder how many people would answer this question correctly. What's the fastest growing city in Australia? Now, many people might consider Brisbane, maybe Perth, perhaps the Gold Coast. But the fastest growing city in Australia is none of those places. The answer is the Warragul-Drouin region in regional Victoria. According to the new analysis of population data, Warragul-Drouin had the highest growth rate in population, both in 2022 and in the past 5 years. Its population rose 3.3% last year and by 20% in the past 5 years, although admittedly rising from a low base to reach 44,000 residents last year. The second fastest growing city in Australia, both last year and over the past 5 years, is the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, which increased 2.5% last year and 13% over the past 5 years. And indeed, all of the fastest growing cities in Australia are regional cities, with Brisbane the fastest growing capital city. And that reality is a reflection of how much things have changed in Australia in the past 5 to 10 years, with more and more people choosing to leave the bigger cities and move to smaller cities or regional areas, the trend we call the exodus to affordable lifestyle. Now, this population information, which has considerable relevance for property investors, is revealed in a new analysis of the latest data by the website id.com.au, which is one of the best places to go for demographic information across Australia. The id.com.au website has published a report on the nation's 50 biggest cities, which range from the biggest, Melbourne, with almost 5 million residents, to the smallest of the 50, which is Alice Springs, with a population of 29,000 people. The analysis shows how much the population of this very big country is concentrated in a very small number of places. 6 of 10 Australians live in the 5 biggest cities, and 84% of us live in the top 50 cities, 29 of which are in New South Wales and Queensland. According to the definitions and parameters used for this analysis, Melbourne is the biggest Australian city with a population of 4.93 million, slightly bigger than Sydney with 4.89 million. Brisbane with 2.55 million people and Perth with 2.2 million are the next biggest, followed by Australia as the 5th largest city with a population of 1.4 million. And those 5 cities contain 61% of the nation's population. The largest regional cities are the Gold Coast Tweed region with over 700,000 residents and Newcastle with over 500,000, both of which are larger than 3 of the capital cities, Canberra, Hobart and Darwin. The 10 biggest regional cities are the Gold Coast, Newcastle, the Sunshine Coast, the Central Coast in New South Wales, Wollongong, Geelong, Townsville, Cairns, Toowoomba and Ballarat, with 8 of the 10 being in New South Wales and Queensland. But perhaps the most interesting part of the analysis by id.com.au is the data on growth rates. In the past 5 years, Brisbane has grown the most amongst the capital cities, up 9.1%, while Perth, Canberra and Hobart have all grown 8.7%, while Sydney has increased just 3.5% and Darwin has hardly grown at all. The relatively small growth in Sydney is again a reflection of the exodus trend and also the fact that the biggest movers with the biggest growth are all regional centres, and the places that make up the regional top 10 for growth over the past 5 years would perhaps surprise many people. Warragul-Drouin, as I said before, is number 1, up 20%, followed by the Sunshine Coast, which has increased 13.2% to reach almost 400,000 residents. Geelong in Victoria has risen 12.8% to be close to now 300,000 people. And number 4 on the regional growth list is Victor Harbor in South Australia, which rose 11% to around 30,000 residents, followed closely by Busselton in Western Australia, which has grown 11% in 5 years to a population of 43,000. Hervey Bay in Queensland and Ballarat in Victoria have both increased about 10% over 5 years. And the top 10 is rounded out by the Gold Coast, Port Macquarie in New South Wales and Dubbo, also in New South Wales. So that's the growth over 5 years. In terms of growth in 2022, the leader is again Warragul-Drouin, which was up 3.3% in the year. Second equal were the Sunshine Coast and Hervey Bay, both in Queensland and both up 2.5%. Close behind is one of the emerging growth centres, Toowoomba, again in Queensland, which increased 2.1% in 2022. So how does all of this impact on property prices? Well, house prices in the Warragul region have been rising strongly as a result of all those new residents flooding into the area. The median house price has grown by an average rate of 11% per year over the last decade, which is a very high average growth rate, with prices up 40% in the past 3 years alone. Many suburbs of the Sunshine Coast have had extraordinary growth, with prices in Sunshine Beach rising 145% in the past 5 years, even despite a significant correction in the past 12 months. Victor Harbour in South Australia, one of the biggest movers in the past 5 years and in the past 12 months, has seen its median house price grow almost 50% in the past 3 years, and its median unit price has increased 67% in that time. So the population data confirms that big exodus trend that we refer to frequently, and the significant impact that it's having on property prices in the key growth centres.